The people, at the heads of the operations building this stuff do not appear to be taking it anything remotely like what I would call seriously. Some of them are records on going like, on record like, well, the Earth might get destroyed, but first there'll be some great tech companies, or just like, ha ha ha, lol, lol, lol. That's not what you want when you're trying to do an unprecedented scientific feat of science and engineering and having it work correctly on the first try, or the entire human species dies. So yeah, like it's not actually all that complicated. You got a bunch of people who are like in the short term, like getting excited looks at parties, which is why they do everything they do, and they can get that by like building scarier and scarier AI, and some actual uses, some very important uses. I don't want to minimize that this, some of the technologies coming out of this would be an enormous spoon, but if you were taking this seriously, you put the whole thing on international lockdown and like have the good uses, the most important good uses, like the medical stuff, AlphaFold, the successor versions of AlphaFold, do that without training the general systems much more powerful than GPT-4. Try to get the benefits of that. Get benefits from the systems that are only as smart as GPT-4, which is a lot of benefit. And then like just shut down all the giant training runs. They don't know what they're doing. They're not taking it seriously. There's an enormous gap between where they are now and taking it seriously. And if they were taking it seriously, they'd be like, we don't know what we're doing. We have to stop. That is what it looks like to take this seriously.
You published an article in Time calling for a pause on training AI models. To clarify, you want...
Well, not a pause, a permanent moratorium.
A permanent moratorium. But you want people to be able to keep using GPT-4 and all AI models and capabilities that exist today, but you don't want GPT-5 and the subsequent ones coming online? Is that...
I mean, if it were up to me, I might possibly, if it were entirely up to me, I might possibly go down to GPT 3.5, but 4 seems like an okay place to stop. It is probably not going to destroy the world, I hope. Compromise, still use GPT-4 instead of going down to GPT 3.5.
Why do you think, why is that where you draw the line?
Because it looks like the current system should not be able to destroy the world, even if people hook it up in particular clever ways. And I don't know what GPT-5 does.
What was...
And neither will the creators at first, because whenever anything at this level of arcaneness gets released, there's a period as people figure out how to hook it up in new clever ways and get more utility out of it than the creators realized was in it at first.
From a practical standpoint, I guess, did you write that as a sort of an expression and sentiment and characterization of the way that you felt?
No, I don't do the emotional expression thing. My words are meant to be interpreted semantically.
So
they're supposed to mean things.
I guess at a very literal level then, how would that actually, let's say China says no, right? And we do it, the US does it. Do we go to war with China over them saying no?
China has published AI regulations. I don't know how seriously they take it, but they have published AI regulations more stringent than the United States ones. So the first thing I would say is that it is not at all obvious to me that China does not go on board with this. I am not super happy with the current chip controls that prevent China from getting real GPUs. Although NVIDIA is apparently allowed to export GPUs to them that are only like 1/3 as powerful as their real GPUs, which it's not clear to me that there's a whole lot of point in that. I'm not quite sure what anybody's thinking there, unless it's just like, haha, slap China in the face or something. But anyways, yeah, like I'm not super. The problem is not China getting the GPUs. The problem is anybody getting the GPUs. And if we are in the world where the UK is like, we need an international coalition to track all the GPUs, put them only into internationally monitored data centers, and not permit giant training runs. If the UK goes to China on that, and UK and China bring in the United States, I might worry a bit about Russia. Russia, I think, would have a harder time getting the GPUs and putting them into data centers than China would. But if Russia manages to do that anyways, then the thing I would say there, the posture that I would hope for international diplomacy to take is like, please be aware, Russia, that if you do this, we will launch a conventional strike on your data center. If we cannot convince you to shut it down, if it is up and running and we do not know what is running on there, or we know that dangerous stuff is running on there, like, we are not doing this in the expectation that you will back down. We are not doing this in the expectation that you will not go to war. We are not being macho and being like, this is us threatening you because we expect you to back down. We will launch a conventional strike on this data center in terror of our own lives and the lives of our children, exceeding the terror that we have even of a nuclear retaliation by you. This is not a macho thing. This is us being genuinely scared. Please work with us on not wiping out the human race here. And if they're like, well, no, we're tough, then you launch a conventional strike on the data center. And, you know, what comes, comes. And the thing in international diplomacy is if this is what you are going to do, be very clear in advance that that is how you will behave. Do not let anyone get a mistaken impression about what you will back down from.
If you were president today or tomorrow, how long of diplomacy and negotiation would you give before you would actually launch? It sounds like we're nearing the point in which you think that airstrikes on data centers and that is a pragmatic approach, even at risk of nuclear war.
It's only helpful if you've already shut down all the data centers in the allied countries or brought them under monitoring that prevents large training runs.
And so let's say that's done. We've done that. You've successfully gotten all the countries in our alliance to do it.
If there are holdout countries that are like, lol, we don't believe the threat is real and assembling a bunch of GPUs, then yeah, I think once you've got as many allies in on it and you have shut down your own data centers first, to be clear that you are not like trying to take capabilities for yourself that you're not willing to lend to others, to make it clear that you are putting everyone in the same boat, that we live or die together in this is not a political stance, but a fact of nature. Then once you've put your own data centers under monitoring, once you've prevented all the people in your own allied countries from doing large training runs, if somebody else is successfully has successfully gotten a hold of contraband GPU shipment and is assembling a data center that can do runs underneath the ceiling that the coalition has imposed, then yeah, I think past that point you communicate clearly that you are about to launch a conventional strike, you beg them not to do it, and then if they keep going, you do it.
And to be explicit about that, you think a nuclear war is preferable to the path that we're currently on?
If Russia drops a nuclear weapon on a U.S. city in response to it's not clear to me that this is how things play out. But, you know, if you conventionally strike a Russian data center and Russia decides that they want to drop a tactical nuke on a U.S. military base somewhere in retaliation, and your policy then calls for dropping a tactical nuke in Russia, and you've got this whole slow motion exchange, there would be survivors. There would not be survivors from an actual superintelligence. Part of the horror of this whole thing is that we will not know what the size of metaphorical nuclear weapon is that ignites the atmosphere. It could be that if Russia's training just GPT-5, that the best guess is that this thing will not end the world. But by them having this thing, if they can thereby gain military and economic advantage, it will break the embargo. And not that day, probably not as a result of Russia training GPT-5, but as a result of everything that falls apart as a result of that, as a result of other countries having to train their own version of GPT-5 to keep up with Russia, such that Russia doesn't even end up with an advantage. Eventually, everyone dies. It would be clearer cut if we could run a calculation and say, Russia, if you train this large AI right now, everyone will die the next day. And so we are willing to, and so a nuclear war is preferable to that. Life would be simpler if that was what it was like. But of course, if you could do an unambiguous calculation like that, Russia would not do the training run any more than they'd like deliberately launch all their nukes at the United States and provoke a nuclear retaliation from the United States. But as long as it's clear how things play out, you can hope for, there is some hope that people with sufficient power to threaten nuclear war if you conventionally strike one of their data centers will not actually do that, because they will not want the nuclear war that results. It's the, in a way, from the beginning, it's the lack of clarity that is the danger. If we knew exactly how large of an AI would destroy the world, it would be much easier to not do that and to have the international arrangement around not doing that and to enforce the international arrangement around not doing that. But this is the problem that nature has handed us. We are not going to get that clarity. And if tomorrow the human species wakes up with the determination within itself to survive, which is not really what I expect, but we would have the option of being like, okay, like we don't know what destroys the world. No training runs larger than this level, and over time you'd have to lower that ceiling as the algorithms got more efficient and it got easier to train things. And maybe there'd be a country being like, we don't believe it, and the correct answer there is like, we're not trying to make your life difficult. We have shut down our own data centers. We are not doing to you what we would not do to ourselves. We are not trying to throw our weight around here. We get that you don't believe it. We're sorry. It is now a fact of international diplomacy that if you build a data center, you'll get a conventional strike in that data center for people acting in terror of their lives and the lives of their children. We're sorry, understand that this is the estimate these other countries have arrived at. We didn't want it to come this way. We don't, but given that this is the case, if you build a data center, it will be destroyed if diplomacy fails. And that seems to me like a potentially stable international situation if tomorrow morning humanity woke up with the desire to survive. Can you have an AI that pursues one thing until you press a button, then pursues a different thing instead? And for purposes of illustrating the underlying problem, you can imagine that one goal is, like making paper clips, whatever. And the other goal is shut yourself down. Fold up what you're doing in an orderly fashion. Like shut down the results of previous plans, but not in a way where you then take over the entire world to make all the to like erase all evidence that you ever existed or something. And we didn't have a specification of a shutdown function. We're rather saying, like, suppose you could describe how to shut an AI down. What does the button look like? It was like the smallest possible change you might want to make. Just switch from one utility function to another. And the issue was, that's not super easy to describe. The issue is that what if, for example, shutting down is easier than what the AI was otherwise trying to do? What if it's easier to get like an A+ on shutting yourself down than get an A+ on making paper clips? Then you perhaps have an incentive to press your own shutdown button. Okay, you say, give it less utility from shutting down. Then it has a chance then it wants to prevent you from pressing the shutdown button. So the question we were addressing is something like, is there a self-consistent view into the AI's preferences, where it doesn't want you to press the button that swaps its utility function, where it doesn't want you to press the button that shuts it down, it doesn't want to prevent the button from being pressed, it doesn't, if it rewrites itself, it will rewrite itself in a way where the button is still there. If it thinks about its own operation, it will not be alarmed by the button's existence, but rather think that the button is supposed to be there. A reflectively consistent meta-utility function that allowed for entering one bit of information that would switch between two object-level utility functions. And the point of this is not necessarily that AI plays out in a way where you can pre-program the utility function that way. You can also imagine that you would have a modern deep learning-based AI where you're trying to train it to let you shut it off. And the thing we were looking at is there a compact mathematical description of what a self-consistent, coherent mind looks like when it will let you swap utility functions, where it will let you shut it off, where it will let you train it, where it will let you further specify the utility function, not try to stop you from doing that, or take away the utility function modifier unit to give itself a utility function that's easy to modify. You can give a simple description of what that looks like. Then when you're training the AI, you could check. You would first of all be trying to train something that was simple, so maybe it generalizes correctly, that fits in with the rest of it, so maybe it generalizes along with the intelligence. You cannot, without greatly improved technology, look in and see if it actually learned that thing, but you would know how to generate new, weird example cases to check if it was generalizing correctly. And this is all just meta on a level where I think a lot of people just flatly did not understand what we were trying to do and thought we were trying to program some AI whose logic was as simple as the logic we were checking to see if it described a reflectively consistent utility function that had a modification button on it. They were like, oh, like good old-fashioned AI, you're trying to do AI with logic, right? And we're like, no, we're trying to find a structure that could be learned, even as... We didn't phrase it as well at the time. Deep learning hadn't blown up to quite the same extent. But the thing we were trying to do was not like build a logical AI, it was understand the logic that you were trying to get into an AI, including maybe a deep learning-based AI.